Hi, good evening. Hello, Dan. How are you doing?
I am good, thank you.
All right. So, looks like with the NFL season drawing to a close today, the crazy NFL season, we do have one more game in the college football left to play between the Michigan Wolverines and Washington Huskies. So, it's going to be an interesting matchup tomorrow night at Houston. So, let's dive in right away with what you think will happen tomorrow. I mean, it's going to go between the Michigan, which is probably the number one defensive team, and Washington, which loves to throw and the air attack. So let's get into the details.
Yeah, so it's going to basically be two contrasting styles, kind of like what we saw in the semifinals last week. We saw the kind of like an air raid or air attack from the second game, the Washington Texas game, where it was just kind of back and forth. Penix had, I think, over 400 yards passing, 3 or 4 touchdowns, and it was just a barn burner up till the end. And then the first game, Alabama versus Michigan, which was much more of a defensive battle. Looked like Alabama was going to pull it out, and then Michigan just came through with some great fourth down conversion, and then just managed to pull it out with some clutch plays at the end. And then in overtime, had two big back-to-back run plays, and managed to stop Alabama with Michigan's tough defense. So yeah, like you said, it's Michigan's got the top defensive team in college football, and Washington one of the top offenses. I mean, the way I see it, it's all going to come down to I think tempo. If Michigan can slow it down, keep it a ball control game, then you got to favor the Wolverines in this one. But if Washington gets those big pass plays and they're able to pass protect for Penix, if he's able to drop back and get a few seconds at least to kind of get the ball to one of his two or three stud receivers, then you'd have to favor Washington, obviously. And so I guess the question is, how do I see it going? I think Washington's offense is just going to be a little too much for the Michigan D overall. I think it's going to be a very tight game. I could see Washington getting out to a fast start and then maybe Michigan chipping away and coming back. If I had to predict a final score, maybe I would go like 31-27 or something. I see a game in the high 20s, low 30s. If it gets over 30, I think I favor Washington. How do you see it going, Sri?
Okay, yeah. So interesting. I mean, just to recap, what we saw, like we predicted, right, in the semifinals, it did turn out to be a defensive battle in the first game between Michigan, Alabama, and Washington and Texas. Texas almost came back. I mean, they had a chance to win despite being down. I know it was a pretty late game, and I think both of us, I think, didn't make it to the entire game. But just watching Michael Penix and the Washington offense and the way they operate. It's the air attack. They got a ton of receivers and a great tight end. And the coach Callan, and I think both of them, both Penix and Callan, both of them at Indiana, rejoined again in
That's right.
2022 to start the Washington Huskies in a new direction. Which this would be the last for them in the Pac-10. They're headed to the Big Ten, where they'll be probably playing Michigan more
That's
often
right.
than just the national championship. And we did see Michigan's defense come through against Alabama. Milrow had the chance; they read it perfectly. As our good friend Pete Sutmeyer called it, that they needed someone to spy the quarterback, and he exactly did it. And they stopped. They managed to stop him on a critical fourth down play. As far as this game is concerned, Michigan is, like you said, number one team on defense. They've not allowed a single team in the country more than 24 points. Even Alabama scored 20. They've not allowed any team cross the 400 yards, which in the college football, it's more than normal. I mean, a lot of teams do go 500 yards and more. So 400 yards is pretty good from a college football standpoint. The one thing I do see is that I was leaning towards Washington because once Washington starts to air out, all Washington requires is some separation for their wide receivers or the Michigan cornerbacks and safeties, and Penix can certainly put some points together. High scoring game. I would favor Washington, but I do think that Michigan defense is playing at a pretty high quality, um, and they'll be able to limit Washington's air attack. And they might not have to do much at all. I mean, I think JJ McCarthy has been serviceable. I think he had a great drive at the end for Alabama to come back and tie it, and then in the overtime, it was just a couple of runs that got them the victory. Um, and I think both these teams, as you know, each of them have won since '97 and '91. This is way before our playoff for the college football. So going back, I think Michigan stout defense and their running game, Corum, has been effective for Michigan, and critical throws by JJ McCarty. He doesn't have to throw for 300 yards. He may have to just throw for 200 yards without making any mistakes. And Michigan's run game, good offensive line, and their defense will keep the game much closer and almost in the lower, I would say 20. So I'm predicting a 27-23 victory for Michigan. And for Harbaugh to
Jim Harbaugh, yeah.
For Jim Harbaugh, you're right. For Jim Harbaugh to win the championship for the first time. So that's where I see it going. And what are your thoughts on my prediction?
Yeah, well, like I said, I still think I still give the slight edge to Washington, but in this last game, Jim Harbaugh is going to pull out all stops. Him and his offensive coordinator, got nothing to hide at this point, or nothing to hide from other teams. So you're going to probably see a little bit of some flea flickers, some trickery. I have a feeling, they've tried that over the course of the year. They've done a few of those plays. They have that in their playbook. So I see, they're going to pull out all stops, come out with some trick plays. And they have plenty of skilled players, although they prefer to play kind of a more of a slow down game, ball control, kind of Big Ten style game. But they have the skilled players to spread it out if they need to. And McCarthy can he's a dual threat. McCarthy he can definitely throw kind of some maybe some good 20-30 yard completions downfield, and then he can also roll out and run for the first down, which he did against Alabama towards the end of the game a few times. So yeah, I mean, I am kind of, I know a lot of the people are kind of anti-Michigan, anti-Harbaugh. I would love for him to get one national title, and he's probably going to move on next year back to the NFL. It's all signs are pointing towards that, I think. But I'm in a way, even though I pick in Michigan, I am kind of rooting for Harbaugh. I like coaches like that who've they're career coaches, lifers, and they've stuck it out. And I would love for him to have one before he moves up to the next level. And yeah, that's kind of how I see it going.
Okay, so you're going with Washington, high scoring game. I'm scoring with Michigan. And although we just want a good game, and I think I'm actually more excited about the next year playoff format with 12 teams making it. And in that case, we would have definitely seen Georgias of the world and Ohio States of the world in this kind of playoff scenario. But the college football, the good thing is it's a 1 versus 2. Michigan and Washington both are undefeated. I think it's fitting that they both are in the national championship. I think all other teams can complain, whether it's Alabama or Georgia and all Florida State, they can all complain. But the two best teams in the land are actually playing for the national championship. And let's see if our predictions come true. And I think this will wrap up our college football. And I know we have another sport that's coming up in about a week or so. That's the Australian Open. And we'll get more into the previews closer to that. But looking forward to that as well. But for now, I would say go Michigan for me and go Huskies for you. And and let's see.
Yep. All right. And then also one last thing you mentioned, I think by accident, a little Freudian slip. You said John Harbaugh before, and that made me think. I'm not projecting out that Baltimore is going to win the Super Bowl. With John Harbaugh, his brother coaches the Ravens. But what a trivia question that would be for 30 years from now. What two brothers won the Super Bowl and the national championship in the same season? That's probably never happened, and maybe never will. But maybe
never will, but I think they have coached against each other when he was coaching for the 49ers in the Super Bowl with Harbaugh did, the Ravens winning the Super Bowl there. So that's interesting too. They coached against themselves in the Super Bowl, and then they could both win the individual titles in their individual sports maybe this year. We'll see. All right. With that, we wrap up college football, and Dan and I will be back to do the preview for the Australian Open. Unfortunately, no Nadal this year, but there's other players out there, and Djokovic is still out there. So we'll come back and do that. All right. Thank you so much, Dan.
All right. Enjoy the game.
All right. Enjoy the game. Bye.